Hey, good morning. Patricia Murphy here. It's Saturday. This is Seattle Now. Today we're bringing you the best from another KUOW show, Soundside. It's been a busy year for the Seattle Police Department. A new chief was sworn in, the longstanding federal consent decree ended, and the city reached a new contract with the Seattle Police Officers Guild that changes how it can approach unarmed crisis response. Plus, a new mayor takes office in January. Mayor-elect Katie Wilson announced she planned to retain Seattle Police Chief Shon Barnes, despite some rumors to the contrary. Soundside's Libby Denkmann talked with Barnes last week.
Seattle Police Chief Shon Barnes, welcome back to Soundside. Thanks for being here.
Welcome. Thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity.
So Mayor-elect Katie Wilson announced she plans to retain you as chief. There were some questions about that. You know, the chief of police serves at the discretion of the mayor. Oftentimes, mayors come in, they replace all department heads, but departments like the police and fire, they are usually a little different. How are you two working together so far, and how would you characterize that relationship?
Well, first of all, I thank the mayor for having confidence in me to allowing me to continue with this amazing opportunity to be the chief of police here in Seattle. I think the mayor certainly recognizes that there's a lot of work that needs to be done. I think she recognizes that, in order to pick any department head, you have to do your due diligence. So we had several conversations where she talked about some things that were important to her regarding public safety. We talked about our values and what things we thought were priorities. I know she's very concerned about our department and ensuring that morale is good and that we're certainly moving in the right direction. And so I'm extremely grateful that she has given me this opportunity. But I want to be clear that this is an opportunity that I have to continue to earn every single day. So every day when I walk through that door, I know that what's given can be taken. And so I have to work extremely hard for the community here in Seattle, for our elected officials, and for the members of the Seattle Police Department.
Do you anticipate changes to the way you lead the Seattle Police Department under Mayor Katie Wilson? She talked to Converge Media, friend of the show, Amari Salisbury. And she said that one of the reasons she was sticking with you was that you have experience reforming police departments, that reform was something that you had talked about. What kind of reform would that look like? And what kind of conversations, obviously things that were behind closed doors, between you and the mayor probably stay that way. But when it comes to the reform specifically, what might that look like?
I think that we're both aligned with best practices in law enforcement, and that's understanding that there are certain type of incidents that police departments maybe need to use the other resources that are available to us, whether it's our nonprofit community, whether it's other governmental agencies. And that's work that we were doing prior to her winning the election. And so we hope to be able to continue with that as a form of reform. But it's always about accountability, which begins with me making sure that I'm accountable to the officers and members of the department, making sure that the members and officers of the department are accountable to the community. And I think we're aligned in those priorities.
I interviewed Mayor-elect Wilson several times on the campaign trail, moderated a debate with her. And one of the things she talked about was community policing, and that she thinks that we need to explore that more and maybe get back to those models that were kind of, 2020 and prior models. I know that you've had experience working with community stakeholders, but what does that look like if the SPD were to get back to a community policing model? How would that change things?
Yeah, I think it really begins with staffing. You have to have the people who can do that. And so that's part of what we're doing. Earlier this year, we launched a pilot called the Neighborhood Police Resource Center. There were 2 officers that we selected to work the Magnuson Park neighborhood area. And those officers worked for 90 days. They were able to get out and get involved with the community. They were able to do self-initiated police activity on suspicious activity. We saw a decrease in crime. We saw an increase in how the community viewed us. And so that's the type of policing that I really got into this job for. And I think that that is something that I would love to do. I would love to see that for some of our more challenged areas like the CID or Belltown or some of the other areas that I think we're seeing challenges that we've been working on for a very, very long time. I believe that when officers have ownership of a particular geographical area, and those officers are empowered to partner with absolutely anyone and everyone, you see better outcomes, you see higher morale, and you see higher retention rates. And so I don't want our department or anyone to feel that we are relegated to nothing but answering calls for service, because that's just one part of the job. The job really is about community policing, and I think the mayor-elect recognizes that.
And part of that is people recognizing the officers who have ownership over those geographic areas, right? It's like you recognize the people that are invested there, and you can speak to them. That's something we've heard from some community members. Let me pivot a little bit just to trends that we've seen in Seattle when it comes to crime, especially violent crime. Seattle has now, it appears, caught up to the nationwide trends of a drop in crime. For a while, we were lagging far behind, with homicides peaking in 2023. Since then, things are getting better. The King County prosecutor, Lisa Mannion, has talked about the difference it makes when, one, police solve non-fatal shootings and that those are prosecuted. Two, also that there's a collaboration between law enforcement. So people who are near gun violence are identified early and services are introduced so that those situations don't escalate and people don't turn to violence to solve things.
Right.
What do you think about that? And what do you think is driving the reduction in violent crime in our city?
Yeah, well, the first thing I want to comment on is the rate at which crime falls. Crime falls differently across regions and across the country. And so if crime fell in Seattle at a slower rate than everyone else, you have to dig into that and say, why is that the case? Did cities that are comparable to us lose 30% of their police department in 4 years? And for many police departments, the answer is they lost some, but maybe not that much. We had a drastic decrease in police officers. And so the strategy had to change just a little bit. But I am glad that we are catching up. This is not a victory lap by any stretch of the imagination. And one crime, one victim, one person who's lost their life is way too much. But we've seen significant decreases this year. I think this is probably going to be one of the best years, if you will, or most productive years as far as trying to catch up, like you just stated. Currently, we have a 35% reduction in homicides, a 30% reduction in shootings, which is what you spoke about earlier, a 5% reduction in aggravated assaults, 15% reduction in robbery, 3% reduction in car prowls, 23% reduction in stolen vehicles. That's almost 1,500 less community members and victims that woke up and did not have their car taken, and a 19% reduction in burglaries. And to put, really an emphasis on this, we have solved 83% of our homicides this year. The national average is 61%. So in some categories, we are exceeding the national average. We haven't just caught up, but we're exceeding that. Last year, our clearance rates on homicides was 57%. The year before that, the clearance rate on homicide was 49%. And so we're certainly headed in the right direction. And you cannot do that without the collaboration of a police department and a community.
Let me pivot now to a big development when it comes to labor relations in our city. That is a huge part of running a big city. And the city council has just signed off on a new contract for the Seattle Police Officers Guild, which is the union representing uniformed police officers. That contract boosts officers' pay, but not everybody's happy with the deal. 3 council members voted against it. They said that they were concerned about issues with oversight and subpoena power. For example, oversight bodies not having the power to obtain officers' text messages as part of misconduct investigations. When you hear about the council having a desire for more accountability measures from your officers, how do you view your role in the conversation as chief of police? Can you do anything there when there is some frustration at the political and public level over transparency and accountability when it comes to union deals?
Yeah, so people need to understand that the police chief is not involved in contract or labor negotiations. If we were, it would look very, very different. My concern is management rights and being able to manage the police department the way I want to. Their perspective is a little bit different, and so we're not involved in that. You know, when it comes to subpoena power, I really think that's a government overreach to use your personal cell phone or subpoena someone's personal cell phone as a condition of their employment is an overreach. It is almost impossible to get a personal cell phone, which technically is a computer, without a judge's subpoena in a criminal case, let alone in an administrative investigation. I think if the time came that you needed someone's cell phone or bank records, and I believe it even extends to your spouse, then I would say that there's probably a criminal investigation and that criminal investigation should precede it. But I do believe that that is the part of the accountability ordinance that I have not seen in any other part of the country. Most places in the country, they have very robust accountability ordinances for police, just like we have here. And yes, certainly your work cell phone and other things of that nature are always subject to open records. But a personal cell phone for an administrative investigation or the cell phone of your wife, I think even some of our greatest critics would want to question why that would be necessary.
Another part of this labor contract was the ability to expand care teams. They deploy a civilian response for things like mental health crises, situations that do not require armed police officers. So this is big. Under the new agreement, these unarmed crisis responders on the care team can now deploy without uniformed officers. Previously, they had to have an officer with them. This is a major compromise. It's a big change that's been in the works since conversations about these unarmed responders started in 2020. What can you say about what this change represents for policing in Seattle?
It represents evolution toward where we really need to go in police work, using more and more partners. You know, I tried to coin the phrase years ago, partnership policing. I don't know if it really stuck or not, but a lot of people were understanding like, oh, okay, I get it. We need more people to help us that do not have a badge and a gun. We support the care expansion. I support the care expansion. I support Chief Barden. I think she has a great vision for what that looks like. But unfortunately, here in Seattle, we had labor issues around that and scope of work issues. And so you have to follow the law. And that's why it was not expanded as quickly as you see in other parts of the country. I came from a department in Madison, Wisconsin, that easily created a care team that was under the purview of our fire department, and they were deployed, still are deployed, and they're doing a great job. So for me, it is not new. As someone who's come from other departments and seen this work. And I think that once they get up and running and get full staff and she's able to implement her vision, I think it's going to be really, really great for our community.
Since we're talking about reform, this is the first time I've gotten a chance to chat with you since officially the federal consent decree has ended in Seattle. So for folks who are not familiar, for 13 years, the U.S. Justice Department had an extra microscope on SPD over use of force and racially biased policing. In September, this oversight was totally ended. It had kind of been in the process of winding down for a while. What is your perspective now on what has changed with no more consent decree and what your role is in overseeing continued compliance and reform at the department?
So as an analogy, police departments are very large cruise ships, like the ones that leave out of here going to Alaska, which I hope to take at some point in my career. Those ships don't just turn because one thing changes. Those ships don't just flip courses. It takes a long time to do that. The consent decree for me, and I've studied consent decrees before, they are the floor, not the ceiling. So what that means is there's still room to grow. There's still room for accountability. There's still room to do better. There's still room for me to look and see what's going on in other parts of the country, what's working. And even though we do not have a federal monitor, we still have an inspector general. We still have a community police commission. We still have a mayor. We still have city council, public safety committee. But most importantly, we still have the community. And it's the community voice that will always be the oversight body as long as I'm here.
We've touched a little bit on staffing, but what is the picture of staffing right now, Chief Barnes? Because for a long time, this was a huge problem. Things were trending better, at least at the turn of this new year. What are you looking at in terms of hiring in the next year?
Yeah, I'm happy to report that year to date, we've hired 159 officers, which is a 127% increase from last year. We've separated less officers than we did last year. We've only separated 65 officers this year, which is an 18% decrease compared to last year. We currently have a net of 94 officers. And so if we continue with what we're doing and everyone's working extremely hard, we hope to have another year like this in 2026, then another year in 2027, so we can really try to get back to the department that we were in 2018, 2019.
I know we just have a couple minutes left. I just wanted to get to a couple more items here. I haven't gotten a chance to speak with you since there was the controversy over the promotion of Michael Tejan, Officer Tejan, to head the East Precinct. I know that you heard community concerns. You walked that back. Just for folks to know, Tejan was disciplined during the 2020 CHOP protests for driving onto a sidewalk filled with protesters. There was a situation where colleagues were allegedly harassing a trans woman and he didn't report it. So there was a big pushback on Capitol Hill, especially, historically gay neighborhood, about Tejan's promotion. Again, you walked that back. I'm just curious what kinds of things you learned from that experience and your reflections on that.
Yeah, I always say that one of the biggest failures in leadership is the inability to make a mid-course correction. It's why in sports teams you have timeouts and why you have half times. It's the opportunity to make a correction. I put in a process for all promotees, and he was eligible for promoting. He was one of the highest persons on the list. And so adhering to the union contract, he was promoted. But the selection was my choice. And I went on the information that I have. Obviously, I was not here in 2020, and I had a process in place where supervisors were supposed to give a reflection of this person's history, and that did not happen. And I have to accept responsibility for that. So I was not armed with that information, nor was I advised that this had happened. It was not a question that I even knew to ask, because in most departments that I've worked in, those types of complaints do not end well for police officers. But again, I have to follow the rules that are in front of me, and I try to do that in order to protect everyone. It was 5 years ago. And since I have been here, Captain Tejan, or Lieutenant Tejan, as I knew him at the time, had been a very good employee, doing the work that we asked him to do. And so I had no reason to think that something like this was in the background. But again, I make the correction. He's now assigned to another area, doing good work. I have no issues with his work performance. But I also want to, again, extend my apologies to anyone who may have been offended by my decision. I own that decision, me and myself alone. I don't put that on anyone else in the department. But I've since created a second level where I'm inviting the OPA director to promotional meetings. And so the OPA director will bring their computer and they'll open them up and they'll read through what the person may or may not have in their background. Again,
that's the Office of Police Accountability.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I apologize. The Office of Police Accountability, so that I have a second independent person in the room that can give me information so that I can make an informed decision.
Final question. What are you looking ahead to in 2026? Biggest challenges for the department in the new year, how you want to address that? I know we only have a minute left.
Yeah. Fear of crime. I want people to feel safer. And although, we talk about numbers a lot, but that doesn't always translate to how people feel. I want to work on fear of crime. I want people to see more police presence on bikes. I want them to see more police presence on foot. I want to work better in the department to create better relationships with the community. I want the officers to know that they're supported and that their work is valuable. And we have a couple of soccer games coming that you may have heard about.
Oh, I've heard. Yeah.
And so my goal is to make sure that the community knows, and this is important, that the community knows that they are safe before FIFA comes, during FIFA, and after FIFA. That's very, very important for me. And so those are some of my priorities for 2026.
Seattle Police Chief Shon Barnes, thank you so much for sitting down with me.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to Seattle Now, and thanks to our generous donors for your support. You can help us out by clicking the link in the show notes, following and rating the show on your podcast app. Soundside is produced by Sarah Leibovitz, Jason Burrows, Gabrielle Healy, Hans Anderson, Jed Kim, and Maleeha Syed. Greg Kramer does our theme music. Seattle Now and KUOW Public Radio are members of the NPR network. I'm Patricia Murphy. See you soon.